well, I'll say is like oftentimes when I work with like kind of uh middle high school or university bands is that you can tell they really like are internalizing the music in a way that like can only come really with like practicing it together for a long period of
Hi, guys.
time.
Scott Cumero, Masters of the Musiverse. Thanks for joining me once again. It's been a long time since I put something out there. To be honest, it's been a difficult school year for a lot of people. I'm not excluded from that, and I just need to take some time off to focus on my family and to focus on my main job. But I love doing this side gig, and I love these interviews I get to do, like this one with this amazing composer Viet Cuong, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Please take a second, subscribe to either the podcast or the YouTube channel. Both would be great, um, because it helps. And if you could go one step further and recommend this to someone that you think might enjoy it, really trying to get to a really crucial number, which is 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's going to take probably another year and a half before I get there, and I need your help. So please do that for me. Um, also, I want to give a shout out quickly before this interview to Zoom. It might be a little bit odd to do that, but Zoom really came through for me. I did this interview back in August of 2021 and didn't touch it because I knew that I just wanted to wait till later, take some time to edit it, and it essentially got lost. For the details are just super boring, and I won't tell you them. But Zoom really helped connect me with the right people to get it back. I'm so thankful because, as you're going to see, this is a fantastic interview. Viet Cuong is a composer with a unique voice. If you haven't listened to his music yet, go and listen to Diamond Tide, which we're gonna listen to, or we're gonna talk about in a little bit. There's a great piece called Renewal. He has this great duet for oboes rather. And just, I mean, tons of stuff. So go visit the website. Links are below, along with links to a lot of recordings and different things we talk about in this conversation. So we're going to talk about his music, some of his early experiences. He talks a little bit about how early improvisation later on led to composition for him. And then we're going to really dig into Diamond Tide and talk about that piece. It's a great grade 2 piece that doesn't sound like a grade 2. It doesn't sound like a lot of stuff. It's a very unique piece. It does some cool things with crotales. Really excited for you to hear this interview and just continue this endeavor. Keep on listening, and thank you so much.
All right. Welcome to Masters of the Musiverse. Today's guest is composer Viet Cuong. I have to tell you, Viet, I was actually nervous about this interview. And I want you to take that as a sign of how much I love your music. I actually did about 20 minutes of meditating before we started because I was getting the butterflies in the stomach. I think it was probably in like April or March of this year where I found your website. And I was like, oh, this is so good. Renewal was the first thing I listened to, which is such a unique piece. And then I've been, slowly listening to other stuff. And right before I listened to there and that piece, wow, it's so different from the other things I heard from you. So anyway, thank you for joining us today on Masters of the Musiverse.
Oh, thanks for having me, and I'm so glad my music moves you in that way.
Yeah, I'm excited to work on some of it this year with my students. So I'm always curious about when music resonated with people and when it became a passion. Can you briefly speak about some of your early music experiences and when it grabbed you?
Yeah, well, I started piano when I was pretty young, around like 5. Not because I particularly wanted to, but my mom thought it would be good for me to do, and so she put me in like Suzuki piano, and I didn't enjoy it because Suzuki is a very regimented sort of method where you play like very specific pieces in a specific order, and all I really wanted to play were Disney songs because it's what I loved as a kid. And since they didn't let me do that, I just wasn't really interested in practicing piano ever. Um, so that only lasted maybe like a year or two. And then when I got to middle school, I joined band. But because I had a background, with piano and reading music, they thought that I would be a good fit for percussion. So I joined band in 6th grade. And it was really in band around like maybe 7th or 8th grade where I really started to really love music. And I think part of it also was when you're a young budding pianist, you only are making music by yourself. But when you're in a band, obviously it's with several other people. And that was something I really valued about it.
Yeah. When did you start composing?
I was around, well, I don't like have like a specific like I don't even know if I could think of like a specific year in which I started to really think about composing. It was more like well, I mentioned how I didn't like to practice piano when I was young. And I would kind of trick my mom into thinking I was practicing by making up my own music at the piano and like improvising things, and she didn't know the difference. She was just happy that I was like sitting at the piano and like, pressing the keys down.
Yeah.
So those were just like improvisations I made, and I kept doing that even when I picked up piano again around like the end of elementary school. I found like a less strict teacher, or my parents found a less strict teacher, and I got to play the music I wanted to. And I remember playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, and kind of figuring out I could make my own melodies in the right hand over the left hand. And around middle school too is when when I really started to love being in band. I started to kind of take those piano improvisations and transfer them to instruments that my friends played. And I would write these little like ensemble pieces in Finale Notepad that were meant to like imitate music by, Robert W. Smith or Robert Sheldon or something. And yeah, it was kind of just a gradual hobby that I had that turned into more of like a serious thing for me.
Did you did you study at a university? I didn't
Yes.
pick it up in your background, I guess.
Well, I didn't study composition like formally until I got to college. I never really had a composition teacher growing up. I've been going through some of my old schoolwork at my parents' house, and I found like some of my early music that I wrote. And I found like all these pieces I wrote middle school and high school, and it really didn't improve much over those years, I'll say. And they were, stuff that you could see like any kind of overly enthusiastic band kid like who wants to write music, right? Like stuff that imitates the music I mentioned, or is like very much like a marching band show or something.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Disney, because that's what did it for me as a young trombonist. I like to play, but I never practiced. And I was in a music store and they had the Aladdin book.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I gotta have that. And like it was like 7th grade, because I love the movie so much. And that's when like I was like, oh, this is like a a fun thing to do, this practicing thing. So
Yeah.
we're going to spend a chunk of time now talking about your piece Diamond Tide. It's a grade 3, I believe, piece for band. How did this piece originate? Where did it come from?
Well, it was commissioned by Cheryl Floyd, formerly of Hill Country Middle School in Austin. And I think, well, I mean, she has such a history of commissioning so many composers in our field. And I think she was looking for another one. And I'm pretty sure John Mackey tipped her off to me, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, she just contacted me and asked if I'd be interested in writing a piece. And I'd never written a piece for like a young grade level like that before, at least as a professional composer. I obviously wrote like middle school level pieces as a middle schooler, but I never written one like kind of, as a professional yet. So I decided to do it, and I'm so glad I did. It was like a difficult piece to write just because I had never like written a middle school piece before, and just like
Writing within that box kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll say that like every piece, even if you're writing a piece for like a professional symphony orchestra, has limitations.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what. Like you'd be kind of foolish to, think there aren't any and write for like 20 sets of timpani or something, right? So there's always going to be limitations on what you can do. It's just a middle school, it's like a very specific kind of limitation.
Yeah.
But the thing that isn't as limited compared to like a professional group is that bands get so much rehearsal time and can really sink their teeth into a piece, whereas professional groups oftentimes put things together in like 3 rehearsals. So you can like write harder stuff, but it might not be like as tight or well, I'll say is like oftentimes when I work with like kind of middle, high school, or university bands, is that you can tell they really like are internalizing the music in a way that like can only come really with like practicing it together for a long period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You mentioned John Mackey in both in this interview and then in the program notes. I'm curious about his connection with this piece and maybe your connection to him in general too.
Yeah, I think I met him years ago at Midwest. And like I got a picture with him like everyone does at Midwest. I remember him being like, "Oh, send me your music," and I sent him some of my music that I had written like very recently back then, and that was over like 10 years ago. I was like probably almost exactly 10 years ago actually, that I first met him. And I sent him my music, and I guess he liked what he heard, and he was really nice in the email back to me. And I think he always just has been kind of rooting for me, which I mean, I'm very grateful for, since he's like so influential. And I'm a big fan of his music too. I mean, his music is so effective, and he always does exactly what he sets out to do in a piece, and that's hard to do. So yeah, it was really just that. And I think he had written some pieces for Cheryl as well. And, I think she took his opinion seriously about maybe like recommendations for composers.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. So it was the program notes are really fascinating on this piece, Diamond Tide. I don't know if we need to go through them, in detail. I personally, I love the idea that perhaps Neptune and Uranus have seas of liquid diamond on them. I enjoyed reading that. So this is kind of an odd question maybe, but did any of the stuff that ended up in the music predate that information? Like, do you have a sketchbook somewhere that you drew from, or did all this come after the kind of research you did about melting diamonds?
Honestly, I can't remember. I feel like I read that article first, and then it all came from there. Like, okay, like the idea of melting diamonds, that's really cool. Like, what could sound like that? Oh, maybe like metallic percussion, they sound sparkly. Like if you are watching like a commercial, a diamond commercial, they'll probably have some sort of sparkly sounds, as like they have lights shimmering on the diamond, right? And so sparkly percussion, great. Well, if it's melting, what sounds like melting? Usually when the pitch bends down. So if I put if you hit a grotali and hit in water, the pitch bends down. Or if you hit a wine glass and it sounds like this like kind of shimmery, glassy sort of sound. And if you tilt it, the pitch bends down as well. So everything kind of came out of that.
Yeah. So I'd love you to, if you can, take us kind of through the piece, and just if you can talk about some like insider information on this composition.
Yeah. So, well, the piece is in 2 movements. In the first movement, everything came out of this submerged crotali idea. Like a crotali has 2 octaves, and I only use the lower octave because I don't love the sound of really high, super high, like metallic percussion. But so I use a low D to start the piece, and it sounds 2 octaves higher, so it's actually quite high. But you hit the D and then you submerge it down. So it's a D, C, and then another percussionist plays that C. And then the next percussionist plays a G, which then submerges down. So D, C, G, F. And then the last crotali is a C down to B flat, and then it kind of resets. So the whole melody, D down to C, G down to F, and then C down to B flat, is like the motive of the piece. It's like the Crotales themselves like wrote the melody for me. um and it's just kind of like all spins out of that. At first you have like the submerged Crotales, and then things layer on top of it, and then I kind of compress the timing between those three different submerged notes until at the end, not the end, but the big climax of the movement where it's supposed to sound very cinematic. You have this melody that's played by like the trumpets and it's it's one of my favorite things actually I've written for band, that first movement. Because I like to think that I know the kind of middle school and high school band repertoire pretty well, just because I grew up in that world and I've like kept tabs with it obviously as a composer, and I'm proud of it because I don't think there are many pieces that sound like that for that grade level. So yeah, and there's also kind of this these clarinet and saxophone like triplets in it that originally I remember it's like da 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 da, and I wanted to have like the seconds and thirds kind of echo the triplets of the first clarinets, and the second alto sax echo the first alto sax. But then realizing like, for middle school, maybe not everyone playing triplets is a good idea. And I remember being kind of like bummed about it because I was like, oh, echoing is something I love to do in my music. And I couldn't do that. But then I was like, oh, if I have like the third clarinets and second alto sax, like echo and eighth notes, it's kind of cool because it's almost like the echo is like a slowed down version of the original thing. So you got these kind of polyrhythms that end up sounding more fluid and like this kind of liquid rhythm sort of thing. It's kind of where you turn something like that could be thought of as like detrimental into actually an asset. So kind of writing a middle school piece where I had to be conscious of the third clarinets kind of being maybe not as strong as the firsts, kind of turning that into like a benefit of the piece in the way that it's written.
So this is just an interest of mine. You don't title the first or second movements. Did you ever have titles in mind for either of those?
No, not really. Originally, I was thinking the piece would just be played straight through, but I kind of like having the two different sections distinct and gives the percussionist time to reset.
Yeah.
And also I think just for that grade level, just giving like everyone time to like kind of regroup and take a break, because at the beginning of the second movement, not a lot of only the percussionists play, and it's like a while before everyone comes in. So if someone's lost, it makes it worse if they were like lost earlier in the first movement or something. Yeah, but otherwise I just think of like just having kind of a slow and a fast movement. It's kind of like my other piece for band, Sound and Smoke, which is like a grade 5 or 6, but it's like a slow and a fast movement as well.
I can't remember if it was in your notes for Sound and Smoke, but you had titled the movements, but you also didn't want that to box the listener in.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe that's probably part of it. That's funny. I feel like that probably was like my thinking.
Yeah.
This kind of like a title like Diamond Tide, I think your mind can go in so many different places, and just kind of like letting the listener decide what they want to imagine with all of it.
I like that, because for me in during the second movement, I was actually imagining like diamonds raining down into this like sea.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to have that ability to take my own interpretation of it.
Yeah, that's funny. I'll just say like anyone's welcome to have their own interpretation, but actually when I think of that movement, I think of like kind of like a storm at sea, like a storm in a sea of liquid diamond, and of course with the storm comes rain, and of course if there's liquid diamond in the sea, there must be raining liquid diamonds too. And so it's funny, we were thinking the same thing.
I'd encourage anybody to listen to this piece. There'll be links to it. It is just very, and like you said, there's not a lot of stuff in that grade 3 range that sounds like this. That's I don't know. I don't think I want to try to put words to it. Like most of the time we're talking about a grade 4 at least for the kind of sounds that you're getting out of this. So I appreciate it as someone that programs grade 3 music, is to have great composers writing for that. And then my last question in this, and it can be tied to your writing in general. Do you remember anything specific with Diamond Tide of encountering like writer's block? And if not that piece, just in general, how do you deal with that, like getting stumped?
Oh yeah, this was a piece I had huge writer's block on. I actually wrote a different sort of piece before what ended up being Diamond Tide. If you ask Cheryl, it probably like really made her nervous because I'm so young. But like originally my plan, and I had worked on it for a long time, was a piece that was inspired by Renaissance music. And it just wasn't working, and I just wasn't liking what I was writing, and I just ended up like throwing it away. Then after that, you like are like, can I even write music anymore? It's like, do I even know how? And like writer's block, but I think oftentimes when I have that problem, I just kind of take a break from it all. Like I think some people like they write every single day, and I don't do that because I just get burnt out on it. And I think when I am burnt, I think most of the time when I'm having writer's block is because I'm burnt out, or I just don't feel fresh or creative or inspired. And so it's just taking a little bit of time, and then like thinking about maybe not the notes you're going to write, but what the piece can be about for a while really helps. And that's like kind of how I came to this idea with that scientific article. And how Diamond Tide came to be was like just kind of taking a break and forgetting everything I'd written in the piece before and starting fresh, because my mind was fresh, and the music I think sounds fresh because of that.
Is like finding some kind of a writing oftentimes inspiration for a piece? Like do you feel like you need to start there? You know what I
Not
mean?
necessarily,
like, okay.
but sometimes it's like visual art as well can inspire my music. Back when I was younger, I like kind of wanted to be like a painter more than any sort of musician. So I like visual art quite a bit. But sometimes my music's just inspired by music itself, or just cool sounds or objects or whatever. Like Renewal, I know you mentioned, is like the beginning is kind of taken from this percussion quartet that I wrote called Water, Wine, Brandy, Brine, and it's for crystal glasses. I mean, Diamond Tide has crystal glasses as well, but just like the piece is inspired by the objects of crystal glasses and what you can do with them. So I try to like take inspiration from everything, just because otherwise you're kind of limiting yourself if you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, you bring up the crystal glasses too, and the crotales. I'm curious, like with a piece like this, did you know you could get those sounds from those things, or did you have to experiment with them, as you were writing?
Yeah, I mean, well, with the crystal glasses, I had written that piece, the percussion quartet, before Renewal or Diamond Tide, so I knew that they could do that because I had actually I had bought like 30 crystal glasses, and I had experimented with them myself, and so I figured that out. And the crotale thing, I feel like I heard it. I wasn't the first person to use that, and so I just can't remember exactly who I heard it used by first.
It's such an eerie sound. Like it.
Yeah.
There's something about that drop in pitch that just.
Yeah, because we always think of percussion instruments as fixed, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
What you play is what you get, But just so being able to bend the pitch of something so fixed, it's like a metal object. You can't do to it.
It sounds metal, so you're bending metal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could like run over a Kachali with a car and it would sound the same pitch probably. But like for some reason, like melt or you can like make it sound like it's melting from submerging it, which is so cool. So yeah, I feel like I heard it from somewhere, but I just can't remember where. Or maybe it was from like multiple things. But what I did was then I was like, well, I know I can do that. So then I took the Kritalis at like the percussion room where I was going to grad school, and I like just had a bucket of water and I had some dental floss that I tied the Kritalis to and just recorded myself submerging various ones. And then I went into like Audacity, like this digital audio workstation, just like layered them until I created that melody with D, C, G, F, C, B flat. And then that's all from there.
Yeah. If a band doesn't have crotales, can they still do this piece?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like all of the Kritalis are doubled by like glockenspiel
Okay.
and chimes some of the time. So it's like you can totally do the piece without them. Because I know they're expensive. And so I apologize, but it's just so cool. Like I could not do it. But it's okay if you don't have them. And it'll kind of sound the same just without the effect of the bending of the pitch.
Yeah. Maybe my excuse to buy myself some crotales this year. So
Yeah. Someone asked me recently or if someone could like make them like in a metal shop, and I was like, I don't think so. I wish you could.
there's a reason they're expensive.
Yeah. And I mean, like some of my other percussion music is written for very like, kind of less fancy stuff, but unfortunately this
Yeah,
calls for
doesn't
very
doesn't
expensive.
Renewal use like spray cans, like air?
Yeah, like refillable air canisters, and I have a piece called Sandbox, which is written for a wooden box that you play with sandpaper. Um, which you can. I mean, I made the box at Home Depot, so some things I write for are very you know, uh, can be thrown together like that. But fortunately, Kurtalis are very complex metal objects that cost a
Yeah.
lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. That if anyone's interested in playing Diamond Tide, you can do it without the Kurtalis. So don't let that stop you.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about with Diamond Tide before we wrap up here?
I don't think so. I mean, I'll say like the second movement, similar to the first movement, uh, kind of being guided by the percussion. The second movement is the same. It's like a C minor triad with the wine glasses that then bends down to a B minor triad back up. And the melody of the piece actually like modulates from C minor down to B minor briefly and up to C minor. So it's like all comes from the percussion, just like the first movement.
Sure. All right. So moving on to like our wrap up here. I'm always curious about what educators, performers, composers, what they actually spend time listening to. And I didn't prep you for this, but I'm just kind of curious, like what kinds of music are you spending your time listening to?
I mean, it's like all sorts of stuff. Usually it's when I'm writing something, I'll try to listen to other pieces for that same instrumentation.
Yeah.
I was writing like a double oboe concerto inspired by Baroque music. So I was listening to a ton of like Vivaldi and Baroque music. Um, I'm like quite obsessed with the harpsichord actually. Even after finishing that piece, I continue to listen to harpsichord music.
Yeah. That oboe piece is amazing. I listened to that yesterday. Yeah, that was, and yeah, that's the one that has harpsichord in it, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I'd love to write like a harpsichord concerto one day, and that'd be really fun. And I listen to like a lot of contemporary classical music. I really love the music by this composer Timo Andres. He's like a little older than me, but kind of my same generation. His music's so like, it's right. It's like so crafty. He's just so good at like writing music. I don't know. It's like it sounds stupid to say.
What was that name again?
Timo, Timo, and then last name Andres, Andres. I don't think he has any Wind Ensemble music, but I'm sure he'd write a really great piece if he wrote a Wind Ensemble piece. And I listen to a lot of pop music as well. Um, I like the kind of simplicity of like chord progressions, but like that's like just one part of music, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the chord progression. Um, but you think of like in pop music how so many songs can use the same chord progression, but it can sound completely different. That's like really cool to me.
It's another level of creativity, right? To be
Yeah,
come up with something new out of that simple structure.
yeah, and it just like makes you think like about how much in music theory and classical music we think about like chords and harmony and that sort of thing, and how we don't talk as much about things like color and um, rhythm, things like that are kind of lost in the wash of tonal harmony and learning all that stuff. So I like just to listen to stuff just like pop music, just kind of remind me of that.
Yeah. So what about you? Do you have anything new coming that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I have like a new piece for soprano and band that's being premiered at Midwest, if Midwest happens this year. um, that's being premiered by the Army Field Band. So I'm really excited about that. It's like I like adapted material from a piece for soprano and chamber ensemble for it.
Okay. Does it have
And
a title?
yeah, it's like the English title is Fishing in Autumn, but it's based on this Vietnamese poem that's kind of like a poem that every Vietnamese kid learns in school. And I mean, I was born here and grew up here, but my parents both remember this when they were in school. It's kind of like the equivalent of like, stopping by the woods on a snowy evening or something. And it's kind of excited to reconnect with that um, like part of myself for the piece. So excited for that. Um, I have yeah, a lot of other pieces I can't really remember right now, but they're coming. Just keep an eye out.
So you are you currently taking commissions? Is that something you have room for in your schedule?
Yeah. Unfortunately for the next like 3 years or so, it's pretty much full, but if you have a really good freshman class right now and want to have a piece for them when they're seniors, like that could probably work. So um, and with commissions too, things are sometimes flexible. Like sometimes things don't happen, or things can get moved around, especially like if that's one thing we learned from COVID, it's that. So I always say like never feel like any hesitation to reach out to a composer, even if you think they're really busy. Like you never know.
Yeah. I mean, I did, and I got Viet Cuong here on my my podcast YouTube channel. So
Yeah, well, that's another thing too. It's like maybe if you can't get a commission from a composer, there's other ways to interact with them or have them interact with your students. So
yeah,
always reach out. You never know.
yeah. Well, I hope that we can have many more conversations in the future. I really appreciate your time today and talking about Diamond Tide and kind of your life as a composer. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a great day.
You too.